Hello, Ken. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Lisa. I'm fine. Lovely day. Beautiful day. Should be sitting outside doing this, really, but never mind.
Yeah. So at the moment you're at the Wat Tyler, aren't you?
I'm unfortunately I've just come back. Well, fortunately, it depends how you look at it. I've just come back from Spain, so we're in 10 days of isolation.
Oh, I see.
And having to take our various PCR tests, which we've done one, but we had two tests before we come back, and they were both negative. So, in theory, we're fine. But we've just got to go through the process.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, what's your latest book then? And how many books have you done?
I've done approximately, I think 10, I say approximately 10 books. The early ones were with a colleague, Stephen Wynne, who's done a number of books. He concentrates on the First World War and beginning to work on the Second World War. But I've done, 4 or 5 of my own since then, over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Awesome. So what's the latest one called?
I've obviously got 1 or 2 others in the pipeline.
Yeah, you're always busy. So what's your latest book called?
Well, there's 2 that come out very close to each other. One was Basildon's Famous People Volume 2.
Yeah.
I say Volume 2 because I did one 4 or 5 years ago, just Basildon's Famous People. I picked up about 50 odd names there, and I thought, well, that's it. But then, of course, as you carry on researching, more keep jumping out the woodwork, and I'm absolutely staggered with the number of people that either in the entertainment world, sporting world, business world, politics, authors, etc., who have made a considerable name for themselves, who are well known.
Yeah.
I always say though that you probably need to know the subject to know them, but once you read about them, you say yes, they are well known.
So who name a few Essex people?
Well, if I was going to just take, well, if you're going to go back to the old book, people come up, because I'm a Laindon boy. I live in Laindon Hills now, but I'm a Laindon boy. People come up with Joan Sims, with the Carry On star, obviously. I always quote a Joe Goodman, who was king of the one-liners. He was a plotlander. Then you've got Eamon Martin. If we move on to the athletic side, he's the last British man to win the London Marathon. In fact, he only probably lives 400 or 500 yards away from me now in Laindon Hills. And of course, then you've got Alison Moyet, Depeche Mode. You've got some of the big names. In the latest book, which is of interest, I find, is that I'm going to have to put my glasses on now, I'm afraid, at times.
Right.
But the one person that did surprise me, which I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't aware of, but when I started to look into authors, you had the guy Wingfield, Rodney Wingfield, who wrote the books on the Frost detective. And of course, you had all this series on the television.
Yeah.
He lived for a long time at Long Riding, Basildon. He then moved to Honeypot Lane, where eventually, unfortunately, passed away in 2007. I was fortunate enough to track down his son and have a chat with him. So in that world, if you're a reader and you know that sort of thing, you would have known about him. Another one, which I did find a little surprising, and this was just by walking around Little Bursted churchyard and seeing all these tombs. Of all the churchyards in Basildon Borough, I don't think there's any churchyard that's got as many tombs, not just graveyards, these big tombs of influential people.
Yeah.
And they've got about 11 up there. And of course, one of the family was the Johnson family. So of course you had Richard Johnson, who was an actor, started off as a Shakespearean actor, etc. And I thought, well, who's he? I don't recognise him. But as soon as I looked him up and looked at his photographs, whether it be an old photograph, when he was a young man, or even of the later ones in his latter years, recognised him straight away. The number of films he got involved with, not only with the Shakespearean Company, but also with MGM, etc., etc. And a part of his fame was he was the first person to be offered the James Bond position. He turned it down. He turned it down.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. On the basis he didn't think it'd be successful. That was one. And also, but he did have a long-term contract with MGM at the time. He then goes on to say that the person they chose, which was obviously Sean Connery, initially was not necessarily the right person, but because they revamped, right, the story of James Bond, he turned out to be the right person. You know,
Yeah.
I find that quite fascinating, but you need to look at him. And of course, you've got some local characters now still. What's her name? Bright. I've got to check her Christian name. I have to check her Christian name in a minute. And if you are a EastEnder person, I don't watch EastEnders. You've got what is it? It's the Old Vic, and should we say, the manageress of the Old Vic, or the publican, is Bright, and she lived, not only born in Basildon, but lived in Lee Chapel South, up by the Nears, as we know it.
I don't know who that is. I don't really watch EastEnders.
I'm just trying.
I haven't done it for ages.
It's Kelly Bright. Kelly Bright's her name, an actress. She often, they write in the paper and they turn around and say, "Oh, brought up in Great Wakering." And that is not the case.
Yeah.
She was born in Basildon, lived there for a few years. Her family did move to Great Wakering, and she was there for 3 or 4 years. But by the time she was, well, certainly still only at junior school, she came back, went to Lee Chapel South Junior School, etc., and went on from there. And even while she was an actress up in London, she was still travelling up from that area. And I've had a lot of Facebook comments on people that did in fact remember her travelling around. So that
I don't know who she is. I've just really lost track with the EastEnders, but I'm sure a lot of people do.
Yeah, well, you will do. Another one that is a big one is Nicholas Farrow, an actor. He lived in South Green area. Now, again, I thought, who's he? So, of course, when I turned him up, I recognised him straight away. And if you remember the film Chariots of Fire, goes back, he was one of the leading people in the Chariots of Fire, doing the race around the circuit at the university.
Yeah.
So, and he's still on TV now. You see him a lot. And we can go on. And of course, I won't even bother to mention the footballers. The amount of footballers that have come out and been professionals is quite considerable. I will mention this one, though, Casey Stoney, because she's obviously, she's a woman footballer who played for England, etc. She ran the Manchester United women's side for the last 3 years, and I think now I've just picked up that she's moving off to America to pick up on a ladies' team out there.
Oh, right.
It's only, only local again.
Yeah.
We can go on. We can go on.
Yeah. Awesome. And you've also done another book about poetry, and also.
Oh yes. In fact, I quite like this one. I was reading it myself the other day after you contacted me, and I thought, you know what, I like this myself. I'm no good at poetry. I don't write poetry. But with all my research over the last 20, 30 odd years, I was staggered at the number of poems that individuals have written on the Laindon and Langdon Hills area. This is in particular.
Yeah.
Right the way back. I've got the odd poem in there goes back 100 years nearly, and others go back to the 1930s, and obviously a lot of later up-to-date ones with poets who are still around or are capable. And I thought, well, I don't know. Let's do a book on the poems, then if we can, write a little bit about the author, but then look at the content and write a historical piece on the content, which is what I've done. I'm quite, in fact, that's that one there, if you can see it.
Poems and brief history. See, need to bring it up a little bit. Need to push it up a little bit.
Higher.
Yeah, poems and the brief history of Laindon surrounding district. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah, I see that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And the intention is, when I get round a bit, I might even look into the whole of the Basildon Borough. Though, funny enough, I haven't come across too many that cover all the other parishes or towns within the borough, not to the same extent as Laindon and Laindon Hills. I think a lot of it is because of the, shall we say, the romantic memories of what they call the Plotland era.
Yeah.
Which is, goes back from the early 1900s through to the even up to the 1960s, actually.
Yeah.
But even later than that, But that's my latest one. So that came out about 6-7 months ago. But of course, with the COVID thing, it's difficult to get it around and to sell it. But I'm not worried about that. I just like to get the information out there.
Yeah. Did you want to read a poem out?
Well, there's one here. I did when we mentioned. I looked at it and I thought, oh my goodness, which one do I read? I'll go back to Plotlands. I can do this, but there's one here I got right at the very end. And I thought, yes, this is more people will probably remember this period of time because I'm thinking of age and everything. And it was called Memories of Laindon / Laindon Hills in the 50s and 60s. What a great place to grow up and play. We went out in the morning and stayed out all day. The fields were big and the ditches were deep. We would get home so tired and just fall asleep. We played in the road with marbles and cards. The traffic was light, not many cars. Apple tree scrumping we all must have done, till somebody would shout and then we would all run. Empty wooden bungalows, weekend retreats. For us was a playground and nails in our feet. Jacko skates were warmed by sun. You'll zoom up and down and have lots of fun. The pebble dash houses all in a row, big gardens with chain link fences was all that we'd known. We had not posh holidays, clothes or posh toys, but we were happy, us girls and boys, lovely Laindon. And that was by a lady called Julie Allen, who I was able to contact her a little while back. She lived in Catford Ferrier Crescent in Pound Lane, just off Pound Lane, but she now lives up in Suffolk.
So she's Bowes Gifford area then?
No, Pound Lane, Laindon.
Oh, right, I didn't know about that.
It's interesting. When you talk about Pound Lane, normally I have to say now Pound Lane, Laindon, because everybody immediately refers into Bowes Gifford.
Yeah.
No, Pound Lane, Laindon. That's where, in fact, I was born, in Pound Lane, Laindon.
Oh.
And Catford Ferrier Crescent was what we were referred to as the Pound Lane Estate, which was a council estate that was built.
It's lovely, isn't it? That's a lovely poem. And
I was about 10, I think, when that was built.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people got a lot of sort of romantic memories, but that's how it really was to them. It wasn't romantic, but they're sort of romanticised about it because things have changed so much. You know. Oh, yes. That's good.
Yeah, I got a lot of enjoyment with that one, I have to say. So I'm actually thinking of probably doing the same for the whole of the Basildon Borough at some point. I'll go through and see what I can find there. But as I've just said, funny enough, I haven't come across that many poems so far that do cover the rest of the area. And I don't know why that is. So, but there is some reason about Laindon. We all reminisce about Laindon, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think also you know that area really well and people know you of the area. So it's probably enough.
Well, I don't think they know me, but I know the area pretty well.
Yeah. So what did you, through lockdown last year, what was the book you were writing? You were writing that book?
The ones that during lockdown, these were the two. They came out towards the end of the main lockdown. They were the two that I was working on. Yeah. They were the two that I was working on. Just prior to that, which I was fascinated about, was another book here. I'll put that up. I don't know if you can see it. They came out a little bit earlier. Joan Rosaire. We called it Lady of the Circus. And I got contacted by another author, Sylvia Kent.
I know Sylvia.
I thought you would know Sylvia, who had obviously been approached by Joan, who lives in Cox Farm Road, isn't it? And I think Joan had been wanting to get her story down. Because she was known as Joan Rosaire and a wonder horse Goldy. I, to be honest, didn't know anything about her, but I went along and said, well, I'm obviously willing to meet up. I went along and met Joan with Sylvia and spent a couple of fascinating hours with her, listening to her memories and that. and find out all about her. And there's no doubt about it. In the circus world, she was extremely well known, not only in this country, overseas and everything. So it was obvious that we had to put a book together.
What was the circus? What was the circus called?
The circus was it was her grandparents who formed the circus back in the early 1900s. Circus Rosaire. No, sorry, not Circus Rosaire.
Yeah.
And her grandfather and grandmother became known as Count and Countess. You know, for whatever reason, it was the Prince of Yugoslavia who had gone along to see one of the circuses and gave her that sort of title. She gave them that title, which is interesting. But so she grew up. She always says, which always staggers me, she said, I didn't have much education because I never went to school. Well, they were travelling around all the time. Well, no, but she's quite an educated woman. She underestimates herself there. Obviously, she's well into her 80s now. I haven't seen her now, unfortunately, for about 18 months. So I'm hoping to get back to see her once I've been cleared with the PCR tests. But I was seeing her nearly every fortnight on that. Quite an amazing memories. Unfortunately, as always, you finish a book and then other little snippets come out afterwards.
I know.
But I think the interesting thing is that she was probably about 14 or 15. I can't remember how old she was when she was. They were travelling between circus sites over in Wales, and as she's gone by, she was driving. She shouldn't be driving because she was underage, but she was driving. Little devil. And her mother suddenly turned around and said, "Oh, look at that horse over there in that field." I think her comment was, "Well, if I do look, we'll probably crash the car." But anyway, they did. They stopped and they saw this Palomino, beautiful looking horse. So when they got back to where they were obviously going, she went back with one of her uncles and they purchased this horse for £60. And that was the first Goldy. She named it Goldy, and after that, and I don't think, from all reports and talking to various circus people afterwards, that there was no lady, no person who could train a horse like Joan did. She was unbelievable. She had, I believe, I think 5 or 6 Palominos in time, which obviously took the name of Goldy. The others passing on and that sort of thing. But fascinating lady. So I did get a lot of joy writing that. But as I'm saying, more snippets have come out afterwards, and you think, well, should one do an update? Then you think, well, that's a bit unfair on those that have already purchased it if you do an update. So I probably won't. But but I will make it point again to see it again.
I've seen a photograph of that. I think it was her circus in Billericay, a really old photograph, probably of the 40s and 50s.
Right.
And
you're correct there.
Also my daughter knows someone who knows her really well, and this was just about the time when I was doing my first book, and I think Claire said I should go and talk to her, and I meant to, but I never got round to it.
No, it's a shame.
I missed a trick there, didn't I?
You did miss a trick there.
Yeah.
In fact, yes, you're right, because her grandparents purchased the farm in Cox Farm Road back in the early to mid 30s, and the idea was that would be where all the animals and everybody would go in the winter, etc. So they would have had the elephants there, the lions there, you name them, etc., plus the horses. And then their first circus for the circus year, which round about sort of Easter time, April time, would have been at some corner in Billericay.
Yes.
And then move on from there. I know that they held it in Laindon and other areas around Basildon, but they drifted all over the country. And Joan still lives in a bungalow which was next to the farm, though the farm had been sold on. But she lives in a bungalow next to it. Of course, then you've got the stories in the local paper with her cousins and that who were married in Billericay, and who obviously went to their wedding on the back of elephants.
I think that might be the photograph I saw.
You probably would have done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So have you? So you obviously not. You've been abroad this year. Did you go abroad last year in lockdown?
No, unfortunately it got cancelled in lockdown. We had a couple lined up for last year and they did get cancelled. You know, my daughter and her husband have a apartment they own in a little place in Spain. Don't ask me where, I couldn't pronounce it if I knew, but it's only about 25 minutes up from Gibraltar.
Yeah.
So, so in the end, after looking at all the rules and regulations, etc., we've been vaccinated twice. You know, we thought, right, no, we're going to take a gamble. But there was a lot of hoops to jump through, though, a lot of paperwork to fill in, etc. But we flew into Gibraltar, I think 7th of July, actually. You have to show all your paperwork, vaccination certificates, location forms, etc. We printed it all out, and I'll make a point of that in a minute. We printed it all out, so we had it there. So all we had to do was show the paperwork. Went through, we had to have a test there and then, flow test.
Yeah.
And so we said, right, so which we did. So have we got to, you know, hang around? They said you get an answer within half an hour, hang around or what? Oh, no, you can go through the border now, which staggered us. So we were able to go through the border into Spain, and all we did there and all they were interested in was our passports stamped up. So we were in the car on the way up to my daughter's apartment when, you know, the phone goes ding, ding, and look up, and there we are. We'd passed the tests, but we were really insane.
Quick,
so I don't quite get my head around that one.
No. Was there a lot of extra expenses to do it?
Well, yes, you got the expenses whereby, for example, before we went, we had to prove that we'd also, and this is obviously arranged before we knew of a lot of the lockdown stuff being eased from today. We've had to book and get delivered to us to do two lots of PCR tests.
Yeah.
And that looking up, that is scary. You literally need to know where to go. And luckily, my daughter was able to find a place because they could have been anything from over £100. That would have cost us £300 or £400. As it turned out, we actually found. My daughter did, and I think that's cost us about £155 to do that.
Oh.
I had to take out separate travel insurance just for the period, and that was another £150 odd.
Yeah.
To cover if we caught COVID while we're out there. I've got travel insurance, but they are not covering you from that sort of point of view. But you can find one or two companies that do. And then additionally, coming back, we had to then spend another £30 because when we got to Gibraltar, we were not allowed on the aircraft until we'd taken another, shall we say, flow test or something very similar. And that was £30 a head. So yes, you know, at least and over and above your accommodation, we had to pay for accommodation. My daughter's place is not big enough. You know, it's probably another £500 cost us. But coming back to the point I wanted to make was that we had everything on paperwork when we went out.
Yeah.
Which was so much easier. We just showed the paperwork, they either scanned it, checked it, fine, through. So many people had it on their mobile phones. Oh, and what a palaver. You're standing there while they're flicking through their mobile phones. In fact, we found one person, the mobile phone, had battery had run out, so they had to disappear and get it recharged. Oh my goodness, what a palaver that was. And somebody turned up, they didn't have their vaccination certificates. Well, have you been vaccinated twice? And we went, yes. Well, have you got your NHS app on? No. Right, go away. So they had to wander off, get the NHS app so they could prove it that way. Now, saying that, coming back, we obviously couldn't get it printed off, but with the help of my daughter and that, we got everything on the mobile phones, made sure they were charged up, but we made sure we put them into a separate folder. So when we got there, we can just flick straight on that and they can pick out whichever one they wanted. But standing behind people, messing around with their phones, that's young people, old people, bit of a pain, but never mind. It was worth it because I saw two young grandchildren we hadn't seen for 18 months.
Oh, that's really good. But so as well as doing your books, you are the chairman of the Basildon Borough Heritage Group, and also the Laindon and District Archive. What are you? Are you the chairman of that as well? Or?
Yeah. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, it depends how you look at it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, they virtually kicked off more or less at the same time. The Laindon Archive one, that's a web base where people can go and put on their memories and people can comment, and we've got a tremendous amount on there. We're in a group of about 7 now of archive groups. Billericay, Wickford, Rochford, Hadley, Benfleet and Laindon. And Tilbury's joined us. It came about because a lady that used to run the area libraries, Sue Hampson, lived in Canvey, and Canvey had got funding and set up their own archive, similar sort of scenario in Canvey.
Yeah.
And she was interested, so she tied up with a lady in the record office, and they got a lottery grant to set up 6 archive groups. And the first one they picked on, out of all those names, in fact, was Laindon. They came to us again, which I find a little surprising in a way, because people talk about Billericay, Rochford, Hadley, Benfleet, all these, sort of, shall we say, bigger names. Don't know how to put it. But Laindon, because we had, through the librarian, we had run a couple of talks at Laindon Library, and it got so many at one point, we had to turn people away. And we did that 3 or 4 times. So she was aware of the interest in the Laindon area. And we hold, well, we're not at the moment, obviously, the last Saturday of every month, a coffee morning in the Laindon Library. And we always get 25 to 30 people. I'm about to contact the library now to see where we stand again. I'm waiting for it to go back. I'm not quite sure what score is there yet.
Well, last time I went to the library in Wickford, it was still playing very, very safe. So we'll have to see where that goes. Yeah. And
then with the heritage, the Basildon Heritage one, I'm sure you are aware of Vin Harrop.
I certainly am aware of Vin Harrop.
I thought you would be. He suddenly put something out. Oh, this is going back, 10, 11 years now, with the swimming pool at Basildon being closed down.
That's right. I was actually there. Yes, I was. Safe our swimming pool.
He was at the meeting I was at, because I contacted him beforehand. I said, look, Ben, I appreciate what you're doing. I agree 100%. I said, but it's too big just for an art centre. Because he was after an art centre. I said, let's it with a museum or a heritage centre, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So he said, well, come along, give a chat. You get up and speak, which is I did. I'm not saying you remember. And from that, we formed a committee, which was a connection, a group of historical people interested in heritage, shall we say, and people interested in the arts. It wasn't long before we suddenly started to realise that when you just talk to the public generally, they understood the heritage side a little bit more than they did the artistic side. So Vin went off on his own, because he started off as chairman, and I took over from there. And then we've had, in fact, funny enough, the lady that stayed on as secretary, Sue Randall, she was an artistic person, but she stayed on. You probably know Sue.
I do, definitely, very well. She was the secretary for the Star Art Group, which I was involved in with Mike Harrington.
Yeah, but she really got herself involved. And if anything, it was because I was doing cricket coaching and doing a number of other things, so I couldn't really spend the time I wanted. But so she really got a grip of it. But then we got 2 or 3 other people that join us who are also very interested. Joe Cullum is the one that works with us now at the moment. You know Joe. Again, very interested. In fact, I'm actually working with Ian Randall, which is Sue Randall's son at the moment. He's a teacher at Northland School, and now working on local history. And we're in the process of supplying a lot of photographs, etc., to them. We're working with him at the moment. So that's a nice connection. But since then, the council then came up, and they obviously got rid of the boat museum at the Green Centre, revamped all that, and they offered us an odd office, and a small display area there, which, in fact, that's where I should be this morning. That's where Jo will be today with probably 2 or 3 other volunteers.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to her yet. I thought I'd speak to her after I've spoken to you. And we've just been going from strength to strength. We're about to get into conversation with the council again, obviously delayed because of the change of administration. And of course, our hope is that sometime in the future, we can get a permanent museum.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
That will be.
In normal times, you have people visit, come by and they talk with you. You've got loads and loads of albums of photographs, which were really accessible for me when I was researching my book. Are they in normal times? Are they accessible for anyone to go and have a look at?
Yeah, oh, yes. But, people can come along under normal times. In fact, it will start opening up again now more, though we have been working there now for the last 2 or 3 months. Obviously, keeping to the rules where we can. But on a Monday morning, we're there from 9, well, say 9:30, give us time to, have a cup of tea, until about, say, 12:30 on a Monday and a Wednesday morning, and then all day Saturday up until about 4 o'clock, 3:30, say. People can come along. We're willing to go through with them. Obviously, quite often, the odd one we might, if they want several, we might say, well, look, we wouldn't mind a little donation, because that's only where we get our money from.
Yeah, so if they want to have a look at several, they can bring it into the other room and have a look. Yeah. But I much prefer the whole atmosphere to go into you to look at photographs than the place in Chelmsford. Perhaps I shouldn't say the word. Records office, because it's very, very formal, and you have to go through all these procedures to actually even look at a photograph. I know. And it's so it's much easier.
The problem is, if you want a photograph, you've obviously quite often got to pay a lot. I think you can take your own photographs now, but I know that that's one I keep remembering. I keep referring to, I should say. I found a whole. I must go back and have another look at it a few years ago, an album which covered a lot of photographs of the Basildon area. And I wanted some photographs of them. She said, oh, no, the architects, no, we're not allowed to. I said, why is that? Copyright again cropped up. And I said, oh, it's interesting. I said, well, do you know who the copyright people are? Well, no, that's the problem. We don't. So I said, well, I pointed to one photograph, that one there. I said, that one there, any idea who's got the copyright on it? No. Well, I can tell you who's got the copyright. Oh, I have. What do you mean you have? I said, because I've got the original photograph, because that's a photograph of my ancestors who ran the first motorised coaches or buses in Laindon.
Who were they? Who are your ancestors?
Well, that family was Hinton's.
Heard of them,
They eventually sold out to Webster, Tom Webster. If you talk to the Laindon people, they mainly refer to Webster's. Yeah. Hintons were there just beforehand, only for a couple of years. And I did meet one of the, I think Watson, was the bus conductor. And I did meet, I think, his daughter as well, who did live in Langdon Hills for a time. Unfortunately, she's passed away now. Yeah, I said, no, I've got the copyright for that. Oh, so I find it most strange.
Yeah.
Copyright's a bit of a pain, really, when you get to old photographs, I have to say.
Yeah.
You have to jump through a lot of hoops. But so far, I don't appear to have had, I'm sure that, I'll be honest, there's probably 1 or 2 photographs there. Yeah, maybe I haven't got proper coverage, but if you put a statement in, to that effect.
So,
fingers crossed.
So it's still been. Have you sort of been Basildon, the Basildon Borough Heritage? Yeah. That's still been going on through lockdown, or is it just sort of closed for quite a while?
The first period of lockdown, no, we had to close down, and then when August, I think it was August time, it was lifted, wasn't it? We were able to come. We were able to go back in, but not have members of the public turn up. 2 or 3 of us. We had to keep our numbers, say to 3 of us in the office. It was okay then. Then we had that second lockdown, didn't we, for a time, which we had to close down again. But then after that, we were able to open up again, and we could have members of the public in theory, by appointment.
Yeah.
And I know that I will be checking when I get back, because there was talk that will probably be lifted.
Okay.
So members of the public can
I was going to ask you, what got you into history and writing in the first place?
That's an interesting one, because we're always after people for people's memories, this, that, and the other. And of course, people said, "Well, have you written yours down, Ken?" Of course, I say, "No, I haven't had time." Looking back, I was never a great scholar at school. I was only interested in two things, well, three things actually. One was sport. I mentioned as a cricket coach, so I played cricket for many years until I was 70. One was sport, and the only subject that appeared to have caught my attention was history. And right through junior school and right through senior school, whenever I've looked back on my reports, I came top of the class every time in history. So there must have been something there.
Yeah.
But what really started it is that I wanted to know, what am I doing in Laindon? How did I live in, how did the family come to Laindon? And because I knew that we had quite a bit of the family and a number of aunts and uncles living around, great aunts and uncles as well, obviously with different names. And I then met up with my nan's maternal nan, or grandmother's brother, who was just one that was still living up in the London area. Only met him the once, and went to have a chat with him. And he told us two interesting stories. One, that my grandfather, maternal, who married me nan, he was injured at the Battle of Furs-Courgelette, I think it's the 15th of September 1916, the day that the British first used tanks. That got me more interested. He survived it, came home, etc. He was also then in the Laindon Operatic Society for many years, which is now Basildon. And I found out I had a lot of my uncles and aunts, so that ticked that off. But I said, "Well, look, how did we come to be in Laindon?" He said, "Your family come from Boxted in north of Colchester.
Okay.
Your grandfather, well, your great-grandfather, and Nathaniel Beardwell, so that's all on the maternal side, came down with the rector, Beaumaris Stacey Clark, who came from Boxted to be the rector of Laindon come Basildon, St Nicholas Church and Holy Cross. He came down as his groom and gardener. So he came down to the area, and the family, obviously all his children followed down, etc. And that's where it all started. Now, it turned out since, if I've got somebody double checking, it could be that through different connections that I could be connected to this Beaumaris Stacey Clark family, because he had a grandson, I think was born in Canada, but came back to live in Laindon and Billericay, and he ended up winning the VC in the First World War.
Oh,
so
right.
I haven't got time myself, silly enough, because of everything. I've actually got somebody looking at that for me just to try and confirm that. So that's where I got interested in it, and was always interested in history and different things. I started to become very conscious that Basildon, I think now, is the largest borough in Essex.
Right.
It's got certainly, yes, it is. I'm sure it's got the highest population. In density, it's second to Southend. But you look at all those other new towns or big cities like towns like Southend, cities, they've all got museums.
Yes.
Basildon hasn't. I've just had a report come through, I requested it, on the archaeology survey that took place a couple of years back up at Nevermain, where they're building the Wesley Gardens estate around Dry Street and the hospital area and the college area. And one of the statements in there actually turns around and says, with permission, the artifacts that were found will go to Southend Museum. There was a big archaeology dig that took place in 2008 at the Netherlands washlands, and all that stuff is going south, or has gone, Southend Museum. Now that to me is appalling.
Yeah.
And I know there's stuff at Colchester. I'm not sure about Chelmsford. There's certainly stuff at Thurrock Museum.
Yeah, there's a Chelmsford Museum. Chelsea
Should
Museum.
be a Basildon Museum.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
And I strongly believe with Joe and everybody else, we all keep talking about improving the image of Basildon. And I think you can do it through the artistic world. You can also do it through your heritage world, if you know where you come from.
Yeah.
So we always concentrate. When people turn around and say they come from Basildon, I immediately quiz them and say, where? And then they turn around and say, oh, I live so-and-so. Oh, you live in Neverton then, right? Or you live in Pitsea, or you live in Vange.
Yeah.
Ah, some will say Whitmore Way. Oh, right, you live in Basildon, because that's the Basildon parish.
Yeah.
You live in Laindon. You come into Laindon and Laindon Hills, you won't have many people turn around and say live in Basildon. Don't get me wrong. I don't have a problem with that, but Basildon is now a borough.
Yeah.
It's made up of all, and if you take an interest in your own area, I think that's where, it will improve things.
Definitely.
That's my belief. Keep your fingers crossed.
My final question is, can you tell me or tell us any lesser known facts about Laindon or Laindon Hills, something that not everybody knows?
Well, obviously, I'm even finding out. The first book I wrote with Stephen Wynne was on the German POW camp 266, which was at Laindon Hills. And that's only going back to, obviously, the Second World War. I'm staggered the number of people are not aware of that. I could also take you to a Mesolithic site up in Laindon Hills, which goes back 10,000 years.
Wow.
I used to walk that site with a gentleman he used to call himself Randall Bingley. Though he lived over in the Thurrock side, he used to walk the hills a lot. He showed me this particular site and the artifacts that he found from it. Up we're in Laindon Hills, where I am now, not far away. They have established. We were aware of an old trackway, an ancient trackway, but now we've got that linked into a Roman road. I think it's now called Hawthorne Park, which is up in the Great Barrier State area. So there's a Roman road there. The interesting thing is, which I always get interested, is that I turn around to people and say, where was Laindon Station built? What do you mean, where was Laindon Station built? Well, what parish was it built in? Well, Laindon, of course. No. Well, Laindon Hills then? No. Oh, where was it built? I said it was built in the parish of Little Burston. Because you need to look at the old maps. And of course, they all link round each other, and Little Burston linked all the way round Laindon, and then linked up with Lee Chapel and went off around there, which was so I always find that an interesting one. That gets people talking from that point of view. Laindon, like Laindon Hills, like all the various parishes, old parishes of Basildon, can be traced back to the Domesday Book, with the exception of Billericay. Billericay can't, because if Billericay wasn't around, it was part of Great Bursting. And on that point of view, I can go on. I can talk about the Peasants' Revolt if we wanted to. They attacked Langdon Hall. I don't know where to start, to be honest.
well, thank you.
What I will say is that St Nicholas Church, Laindon, it was Laindon come Basildon. Holy Cross. Laindon, in fact, was the senior church, St Nicholas. Holy Cross at the start was what we classified as a chapel, but obviously got church status at a later stage. The church itself has two brasses. There's not many churches that have two brasses in the church. Laindon has two. They go back to probably the 1400s, and one back to 1500. Of various rectors at the time. One of the rectors, which was in my first book on famous persons, was Reverend Pell, P-E-L-L. He was a mathematician, and he invented the division sign. So, we've had a lot of fascinating people that have lived in the Basildon area, and Laindon in particular.
Brilliant. Well, that's a good sort of point to end on. So thank you so much, Ken, for speaking to me.
Okay, it's a pleasure. We'll meet up again sometime when we can.
We will.
With one of our coffee mornings, because we started up at Basildon at the Green Centre on the first Saturday of the month. We're going to find out when we start that again. Coffee mornings. We managed to get 2 in.
Yeah.
And they got 25 to 30 people. So as soon as we get the nod, we'll start those up again. So you have to try and get along.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye.